Hi, everyone. My name is Les Velez, and welcome to the Opus interview series. Opus, the Organization for Paranormal Understanding and Support, is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that was founded in 1994. Our mission, simply put, is to help people having paranormal experiences. I'm the co-founder and chairman, and for more information about Opus, please go to our website at opusnetwork.org, which you can see behind me here, well displayed. I'm very happy and excited today to have Preston Dennett with me. Preston began investigating UFOs and the paranormal in 1986. When he discovered that his family, friends, and coworkers were having dramatic, unexplained encounters. Since then, he has interviewed hundreds of witnesses and investigated a wide variety of paranormal phenomena. He is a field investigator for the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, a ghost hunter, a paranormal researcher, and the author of 28 books and more than 100 articles on UFOs and the paranormal. Several of his books have been Amazon UFO bestsellers. His articles have appeared in numerous magazines, including Faith, Atlantis Rising, MUFON UFO Journal, Nexus, Paranormal Magazine, UFO Magazine, Phenomena Magazine, Mystery. Oh, wow. I'm telling you, what a lineup, Preston. Ufologist and others. His writing has been translated into several different languages, including German, French, Portuguese, Russian, and Icelandic. He has appeared on numerous radio and television programs, including Midnight in the Desert with Art Bell, Coast to Coast, and also the History Channel's Deep Sea UFOs and UFO Hunters. His research has been presented in the LA Times, the LA Daily News, the Dallas Morning News, and other newspapers. He has taught classes on various paranormal subjects and lectures across the United States. He currently resides in Southern California, and you must be 120 because to do all of this, my goodness, Preston, fantastic. Oh, wow. I'm so happy to have you here today. So to get things started, now you said in your bio here that you really started getting interested in things in 1986, but did anything in your life happen before that to really point you in that direction?
In some ways, yeah, I think so. Thanks, Les. Well, let's see. I grew up pretty skeptical of all this stuff. I really did. Just did not believe in UFOs, life after death, anything paranormal. But I do remember having some weird experiences as a kid, which I think was sort of my first foray into this. I was like 9 years old, maybe 11, around there, very young, and was watching TV with my sister. And I have 5 brothers and sisters, so for us to be alone in the house was pretty unusual.
Unusual, to say the least.
I think we were alone. At any rate, no one else was there in the living room. And we're watching a game show, Treasure Hunt, and it's just your average game show. And I turned to my sister Victoria. I'm like, I think I know who's going to be picked out of the audience. And it's like, that lady there, and she was. And then they had to pick like 3 canisters, and one had the flowers in them. I'm like, it's the 3rd canister, and of course it was.
Wow.
And there was, like 70 boxes on the stage, and one of them had the big check in it, the $100,000 check. And I'm like, Victoria, I know which which box has the check in it. She's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, it's number, I forget which number. It's like number 7. It was a big number, 73 or something. And she's looking at me. She's like, how could you possibly know that? I'm like, I don't know. And of course, that was the right check, right box. And we just rolled on the floor laughing, thinking this was the funniest thing. And I never really, I didn't know what psychic was or anything. I just thought it was weird and funny.
Yeah, absolutely.
But looking back in hindsight, I'm like, wow, that was absolutely, precognition.
Did your parents have anything like that in their lives?
Yeah, I would say my dad did, though he would deny it. Never read one of my books to the day he died. Did not believe in UFOs, life after death, or any of it. But he was really psychic. He would say stuff, and then it would happen. it was amazing. Like I remember one specific incident. We were on the freeway and we're following a truck, and I'm in the front seat and he's driving. He says, Preston, never follow behind a truck because they will spit up gravel and it will
Hit the windshield.
hit the windshield.
Mhm.
And so he moves out from behind the truck and this sports car zooms off, spits up a piece of gravel and breaks the windshield.
Oh, yeah. It's interesting how those kind of things seem to run in families, and the gentleman from Stanford, Gary Nolan, I guess in Kit Green, took a bunch of people and found that not only did they have psychic abilities, but that area between the caudate and the putamen, there was a lot more connections going on. I'm wondering if that's going on with you. If, have your brain, do a CT scan of your brain or MRI and to see what's going on there, because wow, that's fantastic. So has this continued on in your life, this psychic ability, or you still have that?
Oh yeah, now for sure. But
Uh-huh.
growing up, mostly not until my mom passed away in
Mhm.
1984. I was 19 and I saw her spirit at the service. I saw
Wow.
her as a full color apparition.
Wow.
And again, didn't think ghost because ghosts
Yeah.
don't exist, right? There's no such thing
Right.
as that. So I
Yeah.
just thought, well, I'm really sad. I must be sad because I am seeing her where she is not.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
Look, again, in hindsight, I'm like, well, that was her spirit. Uh, and it was shortly after that I did start having what I would call lucid dreams, where she would come and visit me, and got into dreams and out of body experiences. Started having out of body experiences really in 1988 when I was digging into UFO research. So they came hand in hand. And
Now, when you said in '88 you started digging into UFO research, did you have a UFO experience yourself at any time?
not at that point. I
Mhm.
sure have now.
Is that right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. For sure. But yeah, and I found out UFOs were real in 1986 when I heard a report on the news, like you said in my bio.
Hmm.
Found out that my brother had seen a UFO and my sister-in-law, both of them. They had both had face-to-face contact with ETs. Later, both my nephews would have
Wow.
sightings and contact. So
It's a
friends,
it's a family affair for
it,
sure.
yep, it's in my family. And as you know, this does track families.
Yes. Yes, it does.
So I had my first UFO sighting. Well, the first really good one, because there were a few ambiguous ones.
Hmm.
But in 1992, in late July, I was driving home late one evening after talking to my brother Mark and his wife Christy, and had a little orb drop down in front of my car, right in front of the windshield.
Oh,
And
wow.
I'm looking at it thinking, could this be a reflection? It obviously wasn't, because it was right there in front of me. I mean, like a foot, maybe two away from my windshield.
Right.
Little golf ball size thing. Starting back and forth, it stops, it's looking at me. And I'm like, what the heck?
Yeah.
And this thing goes straight up, and that's all I remember. And I would always tell people, oh, that's my sighting, until years later, someone said, well, what happened after that? Did you? And I don't remember.
Mm,
So I'm thinking there's probably missing time there, because
missing time.
I've had sightings after that, and you remember what happens after. You talk about it, you call everyone up, you write it down, you draw it. I didn't do
Yeah.
anything of that. In fact, I forgot about the whole thing.
Oh,
Completely forgot about it.
boy, it's so typical of what happens with people. They have an experience like that, and the next thing they know, there's missing time, and then they forget about it, and it just disappears from their mind as to what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's when I really started writing more. I mean, I was in this field for about 10 years before I put out my first book. And that's when I started kind of working on writing books, but I'd written like 30 articles up to that point. So
Did you feel compelled to do this? Were you given a telepathic message of some sort?
I suspect that that's what that whole experience was about.
Mhm.
I haven't gone under hypnosis or
Oh,
anything like
really?
that. I would certainly considering it, but I kind of want to remember spontaneously, like,
Hmm.
because people do. You'll get a
Yep.
cue or a
Hmm.
trigger,
Right.
and boom, it all comes rushing back in. And I believe hypnosis works.
Yeah.
I think the fact that so many people's hypnotically retrieved memories match what other people have recalled consciously shows that this hypnosis is a valid tool, though still being controversial. But yeah, I do get the feeling like this is my mission. Kind of
Yeah.
knew from a very early age I was gonna be a writer. I'm like, I told everyone in my family, I'm gonna be writing amazing stories, and they're all searching for what they want to do in life. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
I know what I'm gonna do. And they're looking at me like, how could you know? I'm like, I just know.
Yeah. It's a nice thing to have happen, to know your path.
Yeah.
It's interesting how, in my particular case, I had a sighting in 1991. And when I was 11, or excuse me, in 1958, when I was 11 years old, it put me on the path of reading about UFOs, and of course, then I forgot about everything. Went off to college, got married, have children, moved out to California, and picked up the newspaper one day, and Stanton Freeman was going to talk about UFOs and the government cover-up. Well, that got me all started again, and I joined MUFON shortly after that happened, and the rest is history. And I started to work with people that claimed that they had been abducted or had experiences with non-human intelligences and wanted to know if I knew of other people. And so I started a support group, and in
Wow.
1994 started Opus, to help people like that are having these experiences and don't know where to turn.
There's amazing synchronicity in this field.
Isn't it? It
Yeah.
is. It is. So, and there's been times when I've said, okay, I've had enough. I'm just going to close up shop. And all of a sudden I get phone calls, and it's like whoever they are, no, 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 you can't do that. You got to keep doing what you're doing. And sounds like you're on the same kind of a path where, if you even thought about stop writing, they wouldn't let you.
Yeah, I've actually had sightings. Like, I'll stop writing a book and I'm like, I'm just tired. It's a lot
Mhm.
to live and breathe UFOs all the time.
Right.
And then you have a sighting, and you get I can't say it's super clear, because I have
Mhm.
had some sightings where they spoke to me flat out. I got very clear messages. But yeah,
Yeah.
I will see a UFO and they're like, keep right, right. When's the next book coming out? Don't
Yeah.
stop. Or I'll have one come out and then I'll see a UFO. It's kind of like a congrats.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. No, it's fascinating. I tell you, you hit the nail on the head with synchronicity. How this all it comes about. People talk about the fact. Well, disclosure, confirmation, whatever you want to call it. Um, but I think we probably all of us, everyone on the planet, has had an experience, whether they know it or not. And I think there's going to be a critical mass reached at some point where we're all going to wake up one day and say, "Oh yeah, they're here. Yeah, we've been actually talking to them telepathically, at the moment,
Yeah.
but it's it's such a phenomenon, such an interesting phenomenon, and you've done such a wonderful job with your books. Why don't you tell us one of the stories for you that have really impacted you as far as this field?
Oh gosh. I've been in this field. That's a hard question because I've been doing this for so long.
I know, I
But
know.
I think well, I'll go to an early one,
Yeah.
because it was the one that was really an aha moment for me. Because finding out that UFOs were real was a huge shock. When my brother had described one, I'm like, oh my gosh. And people at work, a lady had missing time.
Mm.
So I'm starting to buy all these books. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is real. There's a government cover up. Why isn't this being taught in schools? How can this be real? And my sister-in-law had described a UFO sighting, and it was just a simple sighting though, right?
Hmm.
But then I'm sitting down with her and I'm talking to her and she's like, well, I did see something else once. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, well, I saw, I was in college and this is in the mid 70s or so. I think maybe late 70s. And she was walking by her home in Van Nuys here in Southern California late at night. And she was taking a walk with her dog. This is in the summer. And she's just a couple of blocks from her home, walking by Stagg Street Elementary School. And there's a big floodlight in the courtyard there. And she saw two kids, what she thought were kids, standing there in the courtyard. And she's looking at them because they were really short. And she's thinking, well, it's kind of too late for kids that age to be out. And what are they doing? They were like pressed face to face together, but not kissing or anything, just looking, staring at each other. So it was odd behavior. And she looks at them and she realizes they're bald. She's like, well, that's weird. Do they have masks on? It's not Halloween. And so she walks up right next to them. She's 10 feet away and they turn and they swivel and they're floating maybe an inch or two above the ground, she realizes. And they've got huge dark eyes. And so she's starting to describe this. And she's never heard of grays. She has not read a UFO book in her life. This subject wasn't on TV at this time.
Right.
This is, before Whitley Strieber's book came out and all of the subject was popularized to any real degree. And I'm like, oh, okay, describe what you saw. And I'm like, she starts describing, these pale white skin. If she says they have a jumpsuit, I'm going to freak out. And because I, by this point, had found Bud Hopkins' book, Missing Time, which was back then not a bestseller. It was published by Richard Merrick Publishers and had just a few copies out there, had not been picked up by Ballantine Books, I think it was. So I had a hardback of this pretty rare book, which described this. And there were only a few books out there that described grays, Travis Walton, Betty and Barney Hill, a few others, Betty Andreasen. So I had these books, but she certainly didn't.
Right.
And just described these grays perfectly from top. She's an artist with a nearly eidetic memory. So she's going from top to bottom. It's like, yeah, they had olive green jumpsuits with Mandarin colors, huge heads. I mean, she described them to a T. And I'm like, do you realize what you saw? Did you think these were ETs? She says, I really didn't know. All I knew is they weren't human. I'm like, did you see a UFO? She said, no, I did not. But I have to tell you, this school is enclosed in. It has a playground, which is enclosed in on 3 sides in a row of trees. She says a craft could have easily landed there and no one would have seen it.
Wow.
And she just walked away as fast as she could without running. But that was when I knew, hands down, that this was a real phenomenon. These are ETs. They're visiting our planet. Because I know my sister-in-law is not going to lie to me. I know she's a good observer. That was when I could not walk away from this ever again.
Wow, what an experience. My God. And then to have that ability to describe it the way she did and to draw it on top of that.
Yeah.
And that obviously is in one of your books, I would imagine.
Yeah. In fact, I'll show you a drawing right here.
Great.
I have it. I had her draw it for me. And yeah, that was absolutely the, here it is, sighting that convinced me.
Yeah, that this is real.
Okay, here it is. That is what, let's see what she saw there.
That's good. That's good. Oh yeah. Wow. Isn't that something? About 5 feet tall. Wow.
Yep. There were 2 of them. And,
wow.
So I'm like, those were grays.
Yeah.
And so, she had a nephew who ended up having a sighting, and he had a humanoid encounter as well. Or not her son, my nephew.
Your family is unbelievable to have that much going on. I mean, that's tremendous. And this took place where? Down in Southern California?
Yep, and Van Nuys.
Van Nuys. Wow.
I'm kind of the black sheep of the family.
You're up in Oregon, right? Oregon or Washington?
No, I am here in Southern California. My
Oh,
sister-in-law and
oh,
brother moved up to Oregon, but
okay.
yeah, when I found out UFOs were real, and Marco was, the only brother who had seen anything like this, and yeah, some sister-in-laws, but there's 8 of us in the family. Well, my mom had passed away, but my dad was like out of his mind. He's like, stop talking about UFOs. And my brother Jamie and Steven and
yeah,
what's wrong with you? I'm like, I'm telling you, UFOs are real.
Yeah.
So it kind of split the family a little bit.
Oh,
But they came around.
Yeah. Well, I remember, when I first got involved in all of this, I felt it was my mission to do a little proselytizing, so to speak. You got to believe this is real. But after a while, I said, this is a waste of time. People will come around when they're ready. And, is it extraterrestrial in nature? Is it interdimensional? Is it time travel? Is it our military? Or is it all the above, which I kind of think it is? I don't know. What's your take on what all of this is?
Yeah, all of the above.
I
do think the military has this technology and is flying some of these around. But I absolutely convinced, this is just my assessment based on the evidence, which I think screams extraterrestrial. It is I don't even like to call it a theory. It's absolutely logical that there would be extraterrestrials given that we exist. And if you look at the evidence based on just, eyewitness testimony, all the way to landing traces and radar returns and medical evidence and implants.
Exactly.
Missing time. People are not in their rooms. They're not there. Where are they? I think this is extraterrestrial. I mean, look at the crash retrieval phenomena. We have these craft. This is extraterrestrial. And yeah, it's interdimensional, but what isn't? We are interdimensional. We can go out of our body. There is another side. Everything is interdimensional. So I'm not sure how useful or helpful it is to say, oh, they're interdimensional. Well, yeah, of course they are. And yes, they time travel.
Yeah, it's all of these things, whether you talk about spiritual awakening, Kundalini awakening, the ability to travel outside your body, poltergeist activity, all of this is connected. It's all connected. Have you had any instances of people talking about reincarnation? And because I've got an interesting little tidbit, but I was curious if you've been involved at all in discussions regarding a reincarnation.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I started having memories of my own with past lives when I was doing out of body stuff. And certainly I started asking everyone much more open-ended questions. Not just, have you seen a UFO, but have you had anything unusual? And a lot of experiencers would describe living in a haunted house or having a near-death experience or having past life recall. And so that came up quite a bit among experiencers, especially some who do recall being ETs in a past life.
Yeah.
So that absolutely turns up. I saw a channeler, Bashar Daralanka. He looks at me. Now, this is well before I had written a book or was at all well known. And he looks at me and says, I see UFOs over your head. You are here to anchor the ET energy. You're going to be doing a lot of research into UFOs, and you were an ET in a past life. I'm like, oh, really? Okay.
Interesting.
So yeah, that does come up.
Wow. Yeah. And I just recently wrote a book myself called The Unknown Other and the Existential Proposition of Alien Contact. And in the book, I have about 25 stories from people in the Opus support group, which is an online support group that we have. One of the people talks about the aliens talking to him about reincarnation and that it's definitely happening. It's part of the whole universal process. And one of the support group meetings that I was involved with when this was back in San Jose, California, one of the people in the group said, "I've seen you before." And I said, "Really? Where, at a UFO conference?" "No, no, I saw you on board the craft." "Oh, really?" And I kind of just disregarded it. And it was like a year and a half later that a totally different person said, "I've seen you before." I said, "Really? Where, a UFO conference, a grocery store, or whatever?" And I said, "No, I saw you sitting on a bench naked on the craft and you were freaking out. And they told me to go over to you to calm you down." Well,
Wow.
at that point, I decided, okay, I'm going to go get regressed. And I went to 3 different people who never found anything in regard to being on board a craft, but I had multiple past lives. And then in a subsequent conversation I had with a person, they said, "Well, maybe you were abducted in a past life. And so this is why it's difficult for you to remember what had happened." So it gets, I tell you, between interdimensionality and time travel and time distortions, it's incredible. What a phenomena! What a
Yeah,
phenomena!
I've had 2 experiences. I interviewed insist up and down sideways that they saw me on board a craft,
Yeah,
and I'm like, really?
yeah.
And I do have some dream recall. I would call it dream
Hmm.
recall of that sort of thing. But man, oh man, that is just wild to me. That and I remember going to one UFO conference and came upon this lady, and I just looked at her and I recognized her, and I'm racking my brain because there's just no way I could have seen her before. I'm like, and I walked up to her. I'm like, "Do I know you?" And she's looking at me like, "I don't think so. Do I know you?" And we're just looking at each other,
Hmm.
and I don't know.
Yeah,
I knew her from somewhere. I never did place it.
yeah. It's 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 interesting how that happens, and you scratch your head and say, "Well, she looks so familiar, or he looks so familiar," and I can't place where the heck they, where I saw them before. Yeah, it is an incredible phenomenon. One of the things that we just did recently, as an organization, we just finished the first phase of a study called the Omega-4 study, where we went out to therapists and who are working with people that have had contact with non-human intelligences. And basically, they came back with the fact that the number one thing people talk about are the grays, that they've seen grays. The second thing are orbs. And then the third thing is interdimensional type beings. And the fourth is poltergeist, ghosts.
Oh wow.
So, eh, and again, I think all of this is so tied together. It's difficult to take it apart and say, well, this is this and this is that, and never the twain shall meet, so to speak. But uh, what have you found as far as your studies in your books here, as far as those type of things? Are people predominantly talking about the grays, but what about other things?
Yeah. Well, I came into the field very nuts and bolts attitude, wanting to
Mm,
prove it and kind of ignoring the spiritual aspects of it, but only for a short while. Because like I mentioned earlier, people started, experiencers especially, mentioning a broad spectrum of paranormal events,
mhm,
and started getting cases which were absolutely mixed motif, I guess you might call them, that,
mm,
like Jacques Vallée says. Like one guy contacted me, a radiologist from Canyon Country, which is in Southern California, in a
mhm.
pretty remote area at that time, certainly, uh, where he lived on the edge of the Los Angeles National Forest,
Oh, okay.
which is, huge. And he described having a UFO land in his backyard, and next day, Bigfoot showed up. So that was my first UFO Bigfoot case. And he's like, "What?"
Ah.
He's like, "Wait, I'm not done." We had a poltergeist outbreak following this. I'm like,
Mm,
"You did?" And he said, "Yeah, doors opening and closing, cold spots, objects missing, the whole deal."
wow.
And So that's when I started to really dig into that connection there. Because I wasn't long after that, I had another UFO Bigfoot case. I was doing ghost hunting at this time because I felt compelled to learn all of this stuff, from multiple personalities to, demonology, to angels, to shamanism, anything and everything. I needed to know because I wanted to see how it connected.
Yeah.
And so I'm doing this ghost hunting case, and this was again in Van Nuys, in an apartment. This was outside of LA. And these two women had moved into a haunted apartment. And it was just this devastating, terrible, demonic haunting where one of them nearly got possessed. And I called the apartment manager. She's like, "I'm so glad you called. Everyone in this building is having problems. I've seen it." I spoke with the neighbor, went there myself. So it was a lot of corroboration. And the two ladies finally just moved out. They couldn't take it anymore and moved to another apartment building. And the ghostly phenomena, the poltergeist phenomena, just dropped off almost 100%. A few little things happened.
Yeah.
And then it was a week after they'd moved, they had a massive UFO sighting over right from their balcony, which is clearly connected. They felt this was absolutely connected. And I have to agree. I don't know.
Yeah. Were you so these ladies moved out? Have you been involved with a case where people have asked you to get rid of whatever it was, a demon or and if so, what did you do?
At that time, no, I did a lot of ghost research, and I wasn't really equipped to clear homes. I was familiar with various methods. They tried everything. They tried saging the house, salting it, calling, bringing in sacred objects, and nothing seemed to work. I have referred people to mediums, things like that. But at that time, no. And my ghost research tapered off. I focused mostly on UFOs, but I have to tell you, I got really into out-of-body experiences as well, and doing it myself, and was able to clear, because I had haunting activity in my own house.
Oh, wow.
Which was not like vicious or hostile or anything, but the light kept going on in my other room where I have a library of about 1,000 books. I'm like, I need to move out of this 600-foot condo and find a place for this book. So I found this little house, which is 800 square feet. And I'm like, okay, this is great. I can fill up a room with books. And every time I'd walk in there, the light would be on.
Oh.
I'd be like, well, that's odd, because I know I turned it off. I don't leave lights on because electricity.
Ghost is afraid of the dark.
I guess so. And after happened the fifth time, and the fan was also on, I'm like, all right. And I had many contactee friends at this point, and some of them were mediums, and two of them called me up. They're like, you have ghosts in your house. I'm like, really? Because I have been having some weird stuff happen. And they're like, yeah, you have at least 2 or 3 of them. And I have out-of-body experiences. So one day I popped out of my body, and I'm like, maybe I should check my house out, because usually I just fly off to the other side where it's beautiful and wonderful. And so I'm wandering through my house in an astral state and came upon this man standing in my hallway. I'm like, who the heck are you? and he says, my name is Mac. I'm like, oh, okay. He was just, an average guy, 5'9", brown face, brown hair, slightly stocky. And so I grab him by the arm. And when you're, astral, you can feel other people who are astral as if they were physical.
Oh.
So I grabbed him by the arm. I'm like, you got to go. You're not supposed to be here. There's another side. I don't know why you're hanging out here on Earth. There's much better places to go. You should really check it out.
Yeah.
And I pulled him out of the house. And it was some months later, I had another out-of-body experience, and I'm on the other side. And I'm wandering just around, and I'm in this kind of mall-like setting where there's a lot of people. And I see this kid, and I'm compelled to run up to him.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking at him, and he looks at me, and his face lights up. And he says, "My name is Mac,
Oh no.
and I love you."
Oh,
I'm like, "Oh, I love you too."
uh-huh. Wow.
And that was kind of really a special
I guess. Oh,
thing.
that's a
So
wonderful story. What a nice story that is.
yeah,
Wow.
I've had a lot of psychic stuff, and I think it's absolutely connected to this, because a lot of the contactees I talk to say, "Oh yeah, I have regular out-of-body experiences." And I'm like, "Me too. Wow, how did this happen to me? What?
Yeah.
What?"
Yeah, it's a very common trait. Evidently, I monitor the online support group, and that comes up often. People talking about it, and people that are doing it, and other people that want to do it, and looking for help in that regard. Yeah, it's it just blows me away. All the facets of this these phenomena, and how they're interrelated. Um, yeah, geez, that's a great story about Mac. Now, they said you had a couple of ghosts there. Did you meet any others, or did they all disappear?
No, there was another guy in there. I went back
Yeah.
into the house, started wandering around, checking out all the rooms, and there was this tall, skinny guy. I'm like, "Hey,
Yeah.
what are you doing here? What's
Yeah.
your name?" He's like, "Oh, my name is Bill."
Mhm.
And these were nice guys. They weren't like,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
kind of regret like kicking them out of the house. but
Yeah.
but hey, there's better places to be. And so I'm like, "Bill, I think you should move on," and I grabbed him by the arm. I'm like, "Let's go outside. I'm not sure what you're doing in my house. You really shouldn't be here."
Right. Right. Oh, that's fantastic. It's interesting, in the title of our organization, we say paranormal, which covers a lot of territory. And as it turns out, most of the cases that we've been involved with are dealing with, contact with non-human intelligences. However, of late, we've had more cases where people have been coming about, poltergeist activity, demons, and that's an area that I'm always looking for more help. So if you know of any people that know more about how to get rid of demons and things like that, I would love to know, because it's, for whatever reason, it may be because of all the stress that's been going on in the world, with the COVID thing, and now this thing in Ukraine, that seems like they're coming out of the woodwork. This, maybe part of that Ghostbusters movie where all the demons showed up, and you need a Ghostbuster. Well, we need a demon buster, and that kind of capability, which is part of this whole thing as well.
Yeah,
I,
it
uh,
absolutely is.
have you had experience with areas when you were looking at the ghost, talking about ley lines being a factor? Uh, I've had a case where evidently a neighborhood was on a ley line, and this one person had come forward with their horror stories about this demon that was leaving scratches on the person's body, and things of that nature. And the person that they brought in to try to help, uh, said that the house was on a ley line, and these demons were coming up out of there, uh, and found out subsequently that other people in the neighborhood that were on the same ley line had had similar things going on, but had not talked about it, simply sold their houses and moved out.
Mm,
And in some cases, it's like you can't do a damn thing unless you move. And even then, some cases, whatever it is may follow you. So it's scary. It's scary stuff.
yeah, I think there's something to that, because that's sort of, there was a wave of sightings over Topanga Canyon in the
Hmm,
Santa Monica Mountains in 1992 to
right.
94. This was kind of
Yep.
my first really huge case. I ended up writing a book about it. And I'm like, why here? What is going on in this area that has so much activity? It's a huge
Mhm.
hotspot. with activity going back decades and still continuing. And I talked to the witnesses, and a few of them says, there's a vortex here.
Mm.
And I'm like, And I talked to people, and there's a huge amount of ghost activity and cryptozoological creatures and all kinds of stuff, angelic, miraculous events. And I started looking at other hotspots, and the San Luis Valley in Colorado.
Yeah.
Christopher O'Brien wrote his
Right.
book about that.
Chris,
It turns
yeah.
out, it's got all this stuff too.
Yeah.
And upstate New York, Philip and Brogno ended up writing a book about ghostly activity that goes on along with the UFOs. And Sedona, Mount Shasta. Yeah. These are areas where I feel like the veil between the worlds perhaps is worn thin, or there's some magnetic energy, electromagnetic energy, that allows these things to manifest or appear more easily. There's something going on with this, that all these wide variety of paranormal events, including UFOs, manifest. I don't like the term paranormal because it's not accurate.
Okay.
I don't feel like anything is truly supernatural or defying the laws of the universe. It's just that we don't understand it. And there's absolutely a mechanism behind all of this stuff that can be scientifically explained if we would just, get to that level of understanding.
Well, that's true. I agree with you on that regard. I wonder if we can ever solve this phenomena based on our understanding of physics as we understand it now. It's I think we're a long way off from being able. Do we even have the language to describe it? So we picked the word paranormal because it seems to be right now, as far as a coverall to all these different phenomena. I don't know if there's a better word. If there is, let me know, because maybe we'll change the name of our organization. But I got a question for you now. With all these abilities that you exhibit, have you also had healing type of abilities?
Yeah, a little bit. I've certainly talked to a lot of experiencers who've really had some amazing stuff with that. One lady, she was taken on board many times, and she had very strong healing abilities. And, brought a lady out of a coma once, cured someone else of gestational diabetes. She, asked me if I'd like to experience some energy work. And I said, "Are you kidding? Of course."
Yeah.
And she says, "Take off your shoes and I'll run some energy up through your legs." And she did, and I could feel it.
Wow.
I felt it like water kind of rushing up through my whole body. And I remember one day, she became a really good friend. We were at a restaurant waiting for our table, and she's sitting on a bar stool, and I come up behind her to massage her shoulders. And she's like, "Oh, thanks, that feels good." And I decide, I'm like, I'm going to blast her with some healing energy, just thinking,
Yeah.
and I'm not at all a healer by any means, right? But I just visualized white light flowing out of my hands and blasted it through her. And she screams, jumps off the bar stool, and twirls around and stares at me. She's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" She says, "You just blasted me with healing energy. If you're going to do that, you have to warn me." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, you could feel that?" And so,
Wow.
yeah, and out of body, a few times I've been taken to heal people.
Wow.
And one really interesting incident happened at a family party. The whole family was there and friends. So there's like 20 people. And my dad has this battery detector with 2 separate leads. And he says, your hands give off voltage. I'm
Right.
like, really? He's like, "Yeah, and you can actually test it on a battery." And I'm like, "Give it to me. I want to see." And I test his hands, and the little voltmeter goes up a little bit. two or three, 4 lines. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. And so I am like super intrigued. And I start testing everyone's hands. And they all pretty much the same. Goes about 3 clicks up.
Mm-hmm.
And I test my sister, and she goes up like 4 or 5 clicks. I'm like, wow, your hands are stronger than just. She's I'll call it Irish twin. She's like
Uh-huh.
a year older than me. We were raised as twins, pretty
Oh,
much. And I'm like, test mine, test mine. And so she does, and mine goes up, boing, like twice everybody's.
wow.
And everyone's looking at me like, oh, your hands are sweaty. I'm like, okay, wait. And I go wash my hands, I dry them off, and I'm like, test me again, test me again. And boing, it goes up about twice as high as everyone else.
Wow. Yeah.
Which I think, yeah.
And that's, when we check out, so to speak, that energy, it goes, we exist beyond our death, as you want to call it, death. And it goes out there into the universe, and it's a cycle. And talk about reincarnation before, and everything. It's fascinating that
Yeah.
energy is there.
We have a huge bioelectric field. One lady I interviewed, she had an encounter. She goes to work, breaks the fax machine, blows it out. And so she goes to her computer and blows that out. She calls the IT guy. She's like, sorry. Goes to the copier, blows that out.
Wow.
Another guy, they sent him home from work. He kept breaking these really expensive. He was, working at a car welding place.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, you have to go home. You're going to the doctor. We're sending you to the doctors. We need to figure out why you're breaking all our machines.
It is interesting that seems to be a phenomenon, like people walking down the street and the lights go out, and then they pass and the lights come back on, or watches don't work, or they break the watch. It's what a phenomena that is as well.
Yeah, so interesting.
It is interesting. I had an opportunity. I was at the MUFON symposium in Las Vegas last year, and I gave a part of a presentation to the experiencer group, early in the morning, and Robert Salas was there with his wife. And they came up to me afterwards and said, "Can we talk to you?" And I said, "Sure." So anyway, I went back to my table. I had a table there in the exhibitor area, hawking the book. And they started telling me the story that they both had experience at the same time, that this entity came into their bedroom, and they were taken. And the really interesting part of all this, besides those two having had it, is the fact that his wife came back with the ability to heal people. And and then of course you've heard stories about the orbs of light going into a person. I think Kathleen Martin wrote it in her book recently, that this gentleman had cancer, and when this orb went into his body, shortly thereafter, I guess he was tested and the cancer was gone.
Yeah, I interviewed that gentleman, Robert Schaefer. Yeah.
Oh, you did? Okay, great, great. Yeah. So, I mean, these are phenomenal stories. I was coming back from another MUFON symposium in Richmond. This is years and years ago. And I happened to be sitting next to a woman who had turned out to be the head of St. Jude Hospital. And so we started making small talk, and, she asked me where I was coming from and going to, et cetera. And I told her, and said, "Oh, that's very interesting." And she says, "I've got a story to tell you." And I said, "Okay." So he says, "Yeah, this is before I was the head of St. Jude, that I was working at a hospital, and this woman came in who had cancer, and they were going to operate on her. And the doctors came in that morning to wheel her into surgery. And she told the doctors, I don't need the surgery anymore." And they said, "What do you mean?" Well, they came last night and they cured me. And they thought she was flipping out. So they said, "Okay, we're going to take you in and we'll do another X-ray," or whatever they were going to do, to double check her statement. And sure enough, the cancer was gone. And that just gives me cold chills when I hear things like that. And psychic abilities, that's another area that is phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. When people have had experiences and they come out of it with psychic abilities.
Yeah, that's more the rule than the exception, I think.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
and the
And
healing, yeah, is huge, because one of my first cases involved exactly that. It's actually that same lady I was talking about, Wendy, who did the energy work on me.
mm,
She had a cyst in her fallopian tubes, and MRI'd and X-rayed, and the whole deal was causing all kinds of pain and problems.
yeah,
Scheduled for surgery. The night before surgery, they came, and she goes to the doctor, and the doctors are all upset. They did the pre-op imaging, and they go into her room, and they're like, "What happened? You had surgery?" And she, of course, denied it. And they're like, "No, we know you did. There's fluid here in your fallopian tubes. It's only present after you've had surgery. What are these laser scars on your abdomen? Where did you go to have surgery? Your cyst is gone." And she played dumb. And that's when I started really looking into UFO healing cases. And
yeah.
I wrote the first book ever published on this.
Oh,
Uh,
fantastic.
yeah, that was my first book I ever wrote. UFO healings, covered 100 cases. I recently put out a book with 300 cases from pretty much all major researchers. I won't say all, but pretty much.
Hmm.
You know,
Hmm.
I cornered Bud Hopkins during a conference because he never wrote about it. He
Mm,
wrote like
yeah.
what, 6 or 7 books.
Yeah. I
Mm.
mean, he was Mr. Negative, with most
Just
of,
to some extent,
yeah.
but not. I mean, his books were actually really good.
Oh, yeah.
Rereading them, and they're not super fear based like
Hmm.
some researchers, but
Yeah. David
but yeah,
Jacobs.
yeah, who also has a number of healing cases.
Hmm.
And John Mack and Edith Fiore and Barbara Lamb and all of them, Yvonne Smith, they all have healing cases.
Hmm.
And I've had many, there, I found 300 cases documented in the literature. I could easily double that. Most people don't report it. This is one of the why I became encouraged pretty early on, like, this is not being portrayed accurately. The contact experience is not, generally speaking, negative.
Hmm.
It can be
That's
very
true.
traumatic, but they're not
Yeah.
here to hurt us.
Right, right. Well, it's interesting, the free organization published that manuscript, a large uh, thing, and they found that like 70 to 80% of the people want the contact to continue. And then the first phase of our Omega-4 study, we found the same thing, that it's a very high percentage that have had more positive experiences than negative experiences. So that's great.
That's
And
what I
that,
found in my research. Yeah.
yeah. And I think it's a factor of we have good people and bad people here on this earth, on this plane, this dimension. But I think we have the same thing going on up there. I think we've got good ones and we've got bad ones. And then even within the groups, whether it's a mantid or a tall gray or a Nordic or you know, uh, what have you, that they can be good ones and bad ones as well. So I don't think, uh,
Yeah.
a lot
And
of people talk.
a lot of it is a person's perception. Because when you're pulled on board in the middle of the night and find yourself naked on a table being examined by,
That's pretty
you know,
bad.
and you're screaming and they're like, "Don't be afraid, we won't hurt you." You don't
Mhm.
really care because
Yeah,
you're in complete terror, and it's
yeah,
a negative experience.
yeah. I think that's certainly what happens with the phenomena is that the initial phase is probably pretty consistently bad, scary, stressful, very stressful. But then after a while, uh, and even in the latter stages, it's almost like the Stockholm syndrome. Why did it stop? Why aren't they coming for me anymore? It's a very interesting phenomenon in that regard.
Yeah. Yeah. Ultimately, I'm very encouraged. I don't think the evidence supports an alien threat narrative. If they really wanted to take over, we would already be taken over.
I agree. I agree with you 100% on that. I think they have the ability. Why now? I mean, why would they even want to mess with us now? We have nuclear weapons, you know? It's in the,
Yeah, if someone has reached the technological ability to destroy themselves and
mhm.
got past that, has the technological ability to travel between star systems, do you really think they need slave labor? Do you really think they need resources from Earth when they can go anywhere?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
think about this logically.
yeah.
And if you look at what actually happens to people who are taken on board, yes, they're physically examined, and that can be very traumatic.
Mhm.
But really, they're given messages. They're warnings. It's very consistent. Warnings against nuclear proliferation,
Oh
against
yeah.
pollution, against our warlike ways. It's very, very consistent.
Very positive messages. And it seems to be like the main theme. You know, let's be better stewards of the planet. Better to one another.
Yeah,
You know, it's
100%. And also
yeah.
very consistent is the spiritual aspect. People come away feeling like they can heal or do out astral travel or past life recall,
It's
levitation. Actually,
yeah, meditation. Sure.
all of this stuff is
Uh,
very much a part of this.
it's a spiritual journey that these people are on, and for whatever reason, if I have had an experience and I'm not remembering it for whatever reason, there may be a reason why I can't remember it, but I haven't gone down that path in a big way. But what I am doing is trying to help people that have had these experiences, and that's what our organization is all about, trying to help people having these types of experiences, and help having them understand that they're not alone, and they're not crazy. I mean,
Exactly.
the-
Well,
you
like you
know,
said earlier, it's not just a few people who are having this. To some, this is what a lot of contactees have told me, especially the ones who are like full on conscious contactees,
mhm,
that contact is very widespread and probably happens to every person to some degree. In fact, this latest book I wrote right here, Symmetry, is about a fully conscious contactee.
mm,
And she's remembered her experiences without hypnosis,
mm,
fully conscious since age 14. She's now in
wow.
her mid 60s, and she's had a lifelong, she basically lives, has two lives, goes up on these craft, goes to their planet, has spent weeks with them at a time, months and months, years, probably all added up. And she says they're 100% benevolent. The accounts you hear of, negative ETs is the
Mhm,
person's perception. I'm not entirely sure that every single one is positive,
yeah.
and she says as much as well. But
Mhm,
her experiences for
have been
her
positive.
have
Yeah.
been positive. Yeah.
Right. Right. Yeah, I tell you. So it, it just blows your mind, when you start thinking about all the facets of this phenomena, and what it brings forward. You know, talking about the number of people that have had this kind of experience. The Roper organization back in '92, published that thing that Bud Hopkins and Jacobs and Bigelow put out. There was something like 6 million people at that time in the United States supposedly had an experience. Well, move forward in time and factor in the fact that they only did the United States. It's a worldwide phenomenon. So I really believe, as I said earlier, that we probably all have had an experience. A lot of us don't remember.
Yeah, which is really kind of comforting in a way to know that, we're not alone,
Hmm.
and we've never been alone. They've been around forever. We know this from,
Oh yeah.
Egyptian hieroglyphs and petroglyphs and Native.
Paleolithic cave drawings, even of
Yeah,
flying saucers, things of that nature.
yeah. Oral traditions from indigenous
Yeah,
cultures all talk about this.
yeah, yeah. It's an amazing phenomena. I just wish our brethren would step in at the Ukraine situation here, and get Putin to change his mind what he's
Yeah.
doing. Oh my God, what a tragedy that is.
Well, Earth has always been very warlike, and I
Oh
think
yeah.
this is why we're seeing widespread contact, especially since the modern age of UFOs, which was the nuclear age. And the ETs are like, all right, that's enough. Enough is enough. They're not going to come down and take over because they respect our free will. We have to learn our own lessons, but they are contacting people on a very widespread basis and doing what they can to help. And I started looking into this. I'm like, why are some people having contact and not others? You know, who has contact, and why not some people? And because it was evenly divided between men and women. People are talking, oh, it's Rh negative. I'm like, well, it's not just Rh negative. People of all ancestries and all blood types,
right?
People of all ages, all across the planet. What is going on here? And of course, we do know that they track families. That's definitely a factor. We also know that there's a psychic, as people who are profoundly psychic seem to draw this into them or will become psychic afterwards. But I did find another pattern which kind of floored me, because I kept asking people, well, what do you do for a living? And you know, Betty and Barney Hill were social workers,
right?
And John Hunter Gray was an activist with us, you know, against racism and stuff. And it started running into a lot of social workers and teachers and doctors and environmentalists and animal rights activists and musicians and artists and writers and, you know, police officers and people who are doing good work for humanity. And I had one couple I interviewed who were alternative healers and social activists in their neighborhood in Hawaii, and they had an encounter. They said, we weren't abducted, we were invited on board. They were very much human looking, or kind of human gray hybrid. And they asked the ETs flat out, because they were healed by the ETs. And they're like, why did you do this? And they said, oh, we are helping those who help others. And they said, well, why don't you just come down and fix things? And they said, well, we can't. It's up to you to solve your own problems. You wouldn't learn anything if you didn't go, you know, suffer
through
the
the process.
of your own actions. And we're not going to, because some people are healed only partially. One lady, she was healed of injuries in a car accident. And they said, we can't heal all your injuries. Some of these are karmic. You chose this. And I've heard that in a number of healing cases. So they understand that people need to go through certain, what we would perceive to be negative experiences that we chose to grow spiritually. So I think that's part of the reason we don't see them just taking over. It's up to us. We have to start electing better governments. We have to learn how to lay down our arms and stop killing people. It's that simple. It's just love and compassion is the answer.
Yeah, that's a wonderful place to almost end our interview today. And I did want to ask you one more question, Preston, and that is, what do you think about the hybrid situation? What is the purpose of the hybridization process that's supposedly going on?
I suspect it's been going on for millennia. And I think if you look at the ancient writings and really dig into the evidence, there's some good indication of that. I think it's basically a continual project of upgrading our genetics and aiming towards a greater psychic awareness and longevity, because we do see that happening. A big awakening of psychic abilities, a doubling of our lifespan over the last couple of 100 years. And one case I always like to point to occurred in Gainesville, Florida, to a gentleman by the name of Jim, who was being visited by Grays, had gotten over his fear. They come to his room and he's like, if you're going to take me, fix my hernia. And they're like, we know of the condition that you speak and we will repair it. Pretty much a direct quote, which they did. And he said, why are you contacting me? Why have you been contacting me my whole life? And they said, we are interested in your genetic potential to live a long time. And his grandfather was 106 and still. So that, I think, points towards this hybridization project and what they're doing. They're not here to take over. We're all kind of extraterrestrial origin. And let's face it, there are human looking ETs out there, a lot of them. So what does that say about human origins and who we really are and our relationship to these guys. So yeah, I think ultimately what they're doing is just upgrading us or following us and doing their best to sort of, yeah, I think upgrading is the best. Well, John Mack talked about that, health upgrades.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I've got in my own research. A lot of contactees enjoy really excellent health. Not all of them, I will
No.
say, but because some do suffer injuries and stuff, gynecologically and otherwise. But yeah, I think ultimately that's what we're looking at, is an upgrading of the human race.
Interesting. I don't know if you're familiar with a book called Rachel's Eyes by Helena Luttrell.
Oh, I sure am.
Are you? Okay. I mean, her daughter evidently went to Humboldt College, I guess, with that hybrid, and that she was being fed special food brought to her by military people. And that story, that is an incredible story. And now here is a person that definitely has features that are peculiar, supposedly per the book. And, you know, when you look at a hybrid like that, you say to yourself, is that an experiment that's gone wrong, or is that something that they're working on? You know, that part confuses me a little bit. What is your
Yeah,
take on that?
yeah. I actually spoke with Helen Littrell,
Uh-huh.
so that was a real treat. Yeah, well, I don't think it's an experiment gone wrong. I think,
Hmm.
the hybrid clearly does benefit the grays,
Hmm.
because this is a very consistent story told by contactees, where the grays have basically stated that, yeah, we've had real trouble with our genetics
Hmm.
and reproducing and radiation damage and so forth. And that's why we are using your genetics, is to upgrade our own genetics. And we at one point did look just like you do,
Mm.
is what I've heard from a number of contactees. And
Oh, that's
I know
interesting.
Whitley Strieber has talked about that, and other
Mhm.
researchers. So the grays are essentially human. And yeah, that's what the hybrid project really is about, is to benefit them, and in exchange they benefit us.
Very good.
And according to Dolly, the lady in my latest book, Symmetry, she says people who go through this do agree to it. They're not being taken against their will. This is a voluntary project, and you may not remember it, but you have given agreement to this, which a lot of contactees do come around and feel like, yes, this was something they did choose. I can't say everyone feels that
Yeah,
way,
right.
because some do feel violated, but yeah,
Yeah.
the more I research this subject, the better I feel about it. I think we're in good hands. We have nothing to worry about. Uh, I don't think, by and large, that they are evil or here to take us over or demonic or anything
Yeah,
like that.
right.
No, no, we would know that by now if these guys were truly here to take us. Well, one lady I interviewed, she asked them flat out. She's like, "Why are you taking me?" And they said, "Well, it's your genetics. We're upgrading our genetics. We've got damage." She said, "Are you going to take over our planet?" And the Gray said, "No, we have zero interest in your planet. You guys are far too emotional. You guys are very negative. Your planet is really badly polluted. What are
Hmm.
you doing? And
Yeah.
besides, there's plenty of other planets out there. We do not need your planet."
No, that's what stories, great stories, Preston. That's a great place to put a period on it. Tell us before we go here, what would you like to talk about as far as your books? You got the latest book out there. You just showed a couple of them. Anything you particularly want to kind of mention, and how to people, if they have a story that they'd like to share with you, might they contact you, or the best way to contact you, if you want them to contact you?
Yeah, thanks, Les. I appreciate it. Yeah, my latest book is Symmetry, a
Mhm.
true UFO adventure. It literally just came out last month. Super excited about it. It's already reached #1 on Amazon UFO bestseller list.
Fantastic.
And so I'm super excited about that. The book before that is called Wondrous, 25 True UFO Encounters. I'm working on another, got like 50 more books I want to write.
Wow.
But yeah, I've got a website. If you just punch my name in the internet, it should take you there. It's prestondennett.weebly.com. All my books are there in excerpts, and you can contact me through my website if you do have a question or a
Mhm.
comment or a story you'd like to share. I always love hearing from people.
Oh, great.
My
Good.
books are on Amazon. I've got YouTube channel, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. This is an important subject, as you know. It's going to
Oh,
change the world. You might not believe in it, but just you wait.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's, as I mentioned earlier, hopefully we're going to reach critical mass here sooner than later on this subject, and more people will understand that we're not alone.
Yep.
So thank you very much, Preston. I really appreciate you being on the show today. And, our organization is a nonprofit and we depend on donations. So if you could hit our site and make a donation, we certainly appreciate it, because of course, as any nonprofit, you have costs regardless. And so we appreciate that help. So again, Preston, thank you so much. And I look forward to getting your latest book.
Awesome. Thanks, Les.
You bet. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye.